the liaise with the Office of Councillor Rawlson King. And I'll be facilitating today's conversation. We are pleased to welcome all community members joining with us both in person and on Zoom, being recorded for information purposes, and we will be uploading it later for those who couldn't attend. I'd like to introduce Aaron and Athena and Michelle. Michelle is online on Zoom. Aaron is at the back and Athena is beside me here from Councillor Rawlson King's office. Everybody's here to provide support and also French translation. Again, Michelle is on Zoom for everybody in the calls. Anybody that send Michelle a direct message on Zoom to share if you'd like to ask a question. We encourage you to keep your camera on when you're ready to ask a question. We also would like to thank Risa at Bacchanal. It is a Black-owned catering company located in the Councillor's Ward. We thank her for providing the refreshments. Our land acknowledgement, we recognize that Ottawa is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We extol for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. It is important to honor and respect those whose ancestors have lived on this territory for a millennia and whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. I'm going to move to our ancestral land acknowledgement. We recognize that Africa, the continent of Africa, as the cradle of humanity. We extend our respect to all peoples who identify as African, Caribbean, and Black, and the contribution they have made to the development of human civilization. We recognize that we are in the latter part of the UN Decade for People of African Descent. It has also been extended to 2028, so we're happy about that. Under the themes of recognition, justice, and development, we take this opportunity to reflect on our current condition in this country and continue to work with our allies towards making long-term improvements to the lives of our diverse people on this shared land. Some quick meeting guidelines. We'd like to ask when people are speaking, there's no interruption. Please hold your question until we open the floor for question period. Zoom participants, please stay muted on the call until you're ready to speak. Also raise your hand and turn on your camera. You also may type your question in the Zoom chat if you're not comfortable asking a question out loud. Again, for Francophone participants, we can receive support from Michelle, who is on the Zoom, and here in person, it would be Athena for French translation. For any Ward 13 specific questions, please contact the office at Rideau-Rockcliffe or at 613-580-2483. That's just a reminder. We also want to remind everybody that this meeting wraps up today at 8. So we'll please keep that in mind for Q&A. I'm now going to pass it over to the councillor for his opening remarks and to introduce our first guest.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rawlson King. I'm the City Councillor for Rideau-Rockcliffe, and I'm also Council Liaison for Anti-Racism and Ethnocultural Relations. And I'm pleased to provide this session where residents can share comments on the 2024 budget. We will have a draft budget that will be before us in November, but I think from previous years, it's important for us to listen first, receive the budget, and then make input based on your concerns. So that's one of the reasons why we are holding this session. It's really to get a sense of what your priorities are, especially focused on diverse communities. It's also important to note that while this session is primarily focused on our diverse communities within Ottawa, I will have a ward-specific budget consultation that will be held virtually on October 24th at 6:30 p.m. So there will be an opportunity if you have specific questions about parks in the ward or potholes, all those types of things, transit in context of the ward, please feel free to utilize that as another opportunity to ask questions. Though this meeting is being held remotely through Zoom and we are meeting virtually, I also want to reiterate that the land on which Ottawa is built is unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that the peoples of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and the land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, and the City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Before we proceed further, I'd also like to acknowledge my City Council colleagues who have joined us this evening. So I'm really pleased that Councillor Teresa Kavanagh, representing Bay Ward, is here, as well as Councillor Riley Brockington, representing River Ward. They have, I must say, an amazing commitment to equity in our last term of council. Councillor Kavanagh was the liaison for women and gender equity, and she's still focused on those issues. And I know that Councillor Brockington is a strong proponent of equity in the city. I have to say I really appreciated in the last term his support of the establishment of an anti-racism office and strategy. I know that he really explained that to his constituents in his newsletter, and was always consulting with me when he had issues around equity. And so I really value the input of our colleagues. I like to remind people, there are 25 of us around the table. It's important to contact me, but you can also contact your counselors as well if you have concerns around equity issues as well. So I'm pleased that you are participating in this session tonight. Your involvement in the municipal budget process is crucial for several reasons. And those reasons include allocation of resources. The municipal budget determines how public funds are allocated across various sectors such as transit, infrastructure, and social services. Active resident participation ensures that these resources are distributed equitably, addressing the community's diverse needs. We also, in the budget process, prioritize community needs. Your input helps identify and prioritize local needs. By participating, you can advocate for projects and programs that directly impact your quality of life, such as better roads, better parks, better social services. We also want to ensure that we have accountability and transparency. Engaging in the budget process promotes transparency and holds local authorities, ourselves, council, accountable for financial decisions. You can question expenditures, seek clarifications, and ensure that taxpayers' money is used efficiently and responsibly. It's also important for us to focus on civic education. Involvement in the budget process educates residents about local governance and financial management. It helps you understand the complexity of budgeting, taxation, and public expenditure, empowering you to make informed decisions and contribute meaningfully to discussions. We're also interested, of course, in strengthening democracy. Participation in local governance fosters a sense of ownership and pride in the community. It encourages civic responsibility and strengthens the democratic process as decisions are made collectively with input from diverse community members. And I take that to heart. Just this last weekend, I was at a meeting of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario in Toronto, and we were focused on building healthier democracies. How can we ensure that diverse communities are able to participate in the process? And during those conversations, I was sharing some best practices about this budget consultation process that we've done for several years around equity. And so we want to share those types of ideas and not just leverage them here in the city of Ottawa, but see these types of approaches actually take root all across the province. Advocacy for vulnerable populations. So it's important for you to be able to advocate for funding for social programs, affordable housing, and other initiatives that support vulnerable populations. Your involvement ensures that the budget addresses the needs of all community members, promoting social equity. And I know that there are a number of people here who are representing different social service organizations. Welcome. We really want to hear from you. We want to hear about the gaps and the opportunities, the challenges, and even the successes, and how the city can step up to support that on an ongoing basis. So it's important that you're here. And, primarily, we want to hear from you. And I know we will, about a potential initiative around advocacy from many individuals and groups in the community. Economic development. A well-planned budget can stimulate economic growth within the community. You can advocate for investments in local business, job training programs, and infrastructure projects that create employment opportunities and enhance the overall economic vitality of the area. And I can say without a doubt that a focus on economic development as well as financial literacy has been key based on some of the discussions that we've had in the context of our anti-racism strategy. In the last, just this summer, we had launched a very successful personal finance program for youth. 120 Black youth went through that program this summer and graduated successfully. And that was based on inputs that we heard from the community in terms of the investments that the city should make into these types of initiatives that are Black-led. So I want you to know that change is possible. We are seeing it. I'd rather see the pace pick up, but I think it's important for us to hear from you in terms of where we need to go. But I must say I'm gratified by the direction that the city is taking in terms of listening to community members, especially around areas of economic growth and development, and taking them to heart. And of course, long-term planning. The budget process often involves long-term planning, and by participating, your contribution to the development of strategic plans helps shape the future of our community, ensuring sustainable growth and development. In summary, participating in the budget process, the municipal budget process, empowers you to influence how public resources are utilized, promotes accountability and transparency, educates the community about local governance, supports vulnerable populations, stimulates economic development, and enables long-term planning. It is an essential aspect of active citizenship and community building. So I really want to thank you for your engagement tonight. This is more about you than about me. So I promise not to speak too much more. We want to hear from you, but we want to set the context for that. Because your insights and perspectives are invaluable as we work together to shape a budget that reflects the needs and aspirations of diverse communities. So that's why I want to introduce you to our first guest speaker, Joseph, who is from the city's finance department, who will provide us with important financial insights related to the budget. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, Councillor King, for inviting me and inviting us to provide some insight around the budget process. So I won't say much, but again, I'm Joseph Mahoney. I'm the Deputy Treasurer overseeing revenue services for the City of Ottawa. Within the finance department. I also have colleagues here from the city, and I believe one will be speaking soon. We have Cynthia Paget, who's the program manager for social development and funding in our community and social services department. We have Maria Penton, who's the program manager for anti-racism, women and gender equity, again in our community social services department. And we have Shanna Culhane, who is the director for gender and race equity, inclusion, Indigenous relations, and social development, which is a really long title, our longest one. But yeah, so we can jump into our first slide. One goal in mind, which is to really help our residents better understand and become more engaged in the city's budget. I hope from the information in today's presentation, everybody will have be able to have more meaningful discussions with your community members and ward councillors on the 2025 draft budget. Next slide. Okay, there we go. All right, so immediately following last year's budget, our staff consulted with every councillor and our residents to get feedback and suggestions for improvement on the city's budget process. Over the past several months, we have been working very closely with the mayor's office to incorporate the input that we've received, and we seek new and improved ways to increase overall engagement and interest in the city's budget process, make budget information easier to access, provide information to residents that they care most about, and finally, make the budget information easier to understand and increase overall budget literacy. I would argue as a municipal worker that the city budget or municipal budget probably impacts your day-to-day life than any other budget that's passed at any other level of government. So today's presentation will really break down to two sections with the questions really coming at the very end of our engagement. The first one is really a municipal back to basics component, and then the budget process and the budget development. And we have a third section on questions, but I think we'll defer those to the very end. Next slide. Okay. So in this section, we'll cover the requirement for the city to have a balanced budget under the Municipal Act and what that means. We'll cover the differences between an operating and a capital budget. We'll cover what funding sources are available for operating and capital budgets, and the city's various budgets and tax levies, as well as user fee charges. Next slide, please. So every year, the city produces a municipal budget. It's one of the most important documents. The budget is a blueprint that defines how resources are collected and allocated. The budget is made up of two main components. It has an operating component and a capital component. The Ontario Municipal Act provides for rules for municipalities to prepare their budgets. By law, municipalities cannot have an operating deficit. So that's one big difference between our budgets and those that are passed, say, by the provincial or federal governments. We're not allowed to run a deficit. The Act requires all municipalities to balance their budgets each year, which means that expenditures must equal revenue. So simply put, the money in must be equal to the money going out, right? So to balance the budget, the city can either increase its revenues using tools such as property taxes, fees, or managing expenses through efficiencies and continuous improvements to continue to focus on providing services for value for money. Next slide. So we'll talk about the operating budget. So the operating budget covers there's a lot of data there, which we'll go through. It covers the ongoing day-to-day expenses that a municipality incurs to provide programs and services to residents, including items such as staff salaries, emergency services such as fire, paramedics, bylaw, recreation programs, facilities maintenance, winter operations, and utilities, just to name a few. Compared to personal budgeting, this would be the equivalent of buying groceries, clothing, paying for hydro, water bills, paying for insurance as comparable examples. The capital budget, on the other hand, plans for acquisitions, replacements of tangible capital assets, which are defined as significant expenditures to provide municipal services with a benefit beyond 1 year. So the capital budget excludes the costs of operating these services, which form part of the operating budget. The capital budget is developed in accordance to council-approved official plans, transportation master plan, the infrastructure master plan, development investments such as road paving and resurfacing, sidewalks, new investments in new facilities, investments to maintain existing facilities, bridges, parks, infrastructure, water treatment plants, pumping stations, water, wastewater, storm infrastructure such as underground pipes, and traffic control devices, and PXOs, to list a few examples. So compared to personal budgeting, this is the equivalent of buying a new car, replacing your furnace, building an addition on the house, or replacing your roof as comparable examples. So there are a couple of questions that come up on how does the city figure out what it's going to invest in terms of its capital. And again, just to reiterate that this is all based on these long-term plans that are in place for each and every service type that we have, that sort of look out and sort of say, okay, what are our capital needs? What do we need to replace? What do we need to build over the next 10, 15 years? And therefore, we start to set aside funding or to plan for funding for those pieces. And inside those plans, we also try to forecast. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about funding sources for the operating budget include property taxes, which include the citywide levy. There's a transit levy, there's a police levy, a fire levy. There's also user fees and charges, the most common ones being your water bill, water and utility bill. And then we have assessment growth related revenues. So those are new buildings and new homes and or properties that are being built across the city. When they come live, they start paying property taxes, and those are new taxes that the city did not have before. We also have provincial and federal funding, so funds that we get from higher levels of government. We have payments in lieu of taxes. And if you've been following the media, perhaps in the last month or two, you've heard the mayor talk a little bit about payments in lieu of taxes, which are taxes and or tax equivalents that are paid by the federal government and or other levels of government in lieu of paying taxes. And then finally, we have investment income and dividends, which make up part of that operating budget. But by and large, you can see that most of our funding for our operating budget will come from property taxes. On the capital side, the funding sources include, again, annual property taxes, development charges. We have federal and provincial funding, and then debt. So in Ontario, municipalities can issue long-term debt to fund capital projects. However, per the Municipal Act, they may not commit more than 25% of their own source revenue to service a long-term debt and other long-term obligations. So the cities of Ottawa's fiscal framework further limits this debt level to 7.5%. And finally, there's water utility rate supported infrastructure fees that are also used to fund capital budgets. Next slide, please. Okay, so the city has four major budget categories or groupings. The first three on this slide include tax supported, transit, and police, are each funded through their own separate tax, each with their own levy. The fourth is rate supported and is funded through water utility bill charges. I will explain each of these in detail over the next few slides. Next slide. So the majority of city programs and services are funded through annual property taxes. These programs and services are referred to as tax-supported services and are funded by the citywide tax levy on your property tax bill. Property taxes are the largest single source of revenue for the city and represents approximately 46% of our annual revenue. Examples of tax-supported programs or services include roads and winter maintenance, parks, recreation, and facility services and programs such as where we are today, libraries, public health, paramedics, community and social services, fire services, and the Office of the Auditor General, just to name a few. It is important to note that some tax-supported programs receive provincial funding. For example, public health receives 75% provincial funding and 25% city funding. Paramedics have a 50-50 split in terms of funding from the province and the city. Community and social services also have a variety of different funding percentages. Okay, so next slide, we'll talk about the transit services budget and the police budget. So the transit services budget is funded through a separate tax on the property tax bill called the transit levy. The transit levy is its own separate tax stream. The city's fiscal framework recommends transit fares recover 55% and the remaining 45% be a transit tax levy. Transit services receives federal and provincial funding through the provincial and federal gas tax. The city's transit falls under the authority of the Transit Commission and includes services provided by OC Transpo, Paratranspo, and the city's light rail. Moving on to the police budget. The budget for the city police services is also funded through a separate tax on the property tax bill called the police levy. The police levy is its own separate tax stream on the property tax bill, and the Ottawa Police Service falls under the authority of the Police Services Board. Next slide, please. Okay. Now we move on to the rate-supported budget. So the city's water, wastewater, and stormwater services are funded through a separate user fee charged to residents on their bi-monthly water utility bill, or as a fee on the property tax bill in case of stormwater if you're in the rural area. These programs and services are referred to as rate-supported services. Examples of rate-supported programs services include drinking water purification, delivery of clean water to residents and businesses, collection and treatment of wastewater, stormwater management, water meter installation, and life cycle. The budget for the city's rate-supported services falls under the authority of the Environment and Climate Change Committee and is directed by the council-approved rate long-range financial plan. Next slide, please. I'm hoping you're seeing all the connections in terms of, how your property tax bill and your water bill all sort of go into funding various aspects of city services. So let's talk about user fees and charges. So the Municipal Act allows municipalities to impose fees and charges to recover the costs of delivering services in their jurisdictions. Revenues from these from the fees are used to offset costs of providing the good or service. The Municipal Act prescribes the various areas that the fees or charges can be imposed. For example, user fees that you might be aware of might include transit fares, recreation program fees, facility arena rentals, building permits, parking permits, and your water utility bill. Next slide, please. And I see garbage fee on there as well. So we will now move to the second section, which is the budget process and development. So far, just to recap, we've covered some of the budget basics. And now we'll delve into the budget process, how the budget is developed, the committee structure and the budget books, the 2025 budget enhancement. We'll talk about the term of council priorities, and finally, the 2025 council and budget committee meeting schedule. Next slide, please. So let's start off with the budget process. So beginning with the budget process itself, I'd like to reiterate that the budget is a year-round process, right? And we will go over the budget directions, public engagement, and budget tabling and adoption components. Let's jump to the next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about budget directions, each of these components. So the budget cycle formally kicks off with council-approved budget directions. For the 2025 budget, this was approved by City Council on September 18th of this year. The budget directions report identifies the approach and a timetable, plus the upper limit tax increases to the citywide police services and transit tax levies. In addition, it identifies the guiding principles and the fiscal framework to develop the budget that includes, but is not limited to, forecasting revenues, determining rate program increases, and changes to user fees and charges. Next slide. So just to pause there, if you go back, you can actually see, So this year, as part of our budget directions, council approved a tax levy increase of 2.9% for all levies except the transit levy, which was given a range. And then we had a rate program increase of 4.4%. That's really what your water bill sort of looks like. And then we also came up with a schedule in terms of when all these deliberations and meetings will occur. Okay, let's jump to the next slide. Public engagement. So another key component of the budget process is public engagement. Opportunities for residents to share feedback are by contacting one's ward councillor. There's online engagement through our Engage Ottawa. So if you go to engageottawa.ca, there is a page there where you can provide feedback in terms of the budget. There are councillor-led public consultations, such as the one we're at today. We have enhanced social media posts. There's electronic advertisements at city facilities and promotional videos on how to engage on the city budget. Video will be provided to councillors for promotion. So there's that promotional video there that we're talking about. Next slide, please. So the city's draft budget is tabled at council. The city's budget is broken down into a series of budgets organized by each of these standing committees, and each committee is forwarded their draft for their review. Each standing committee reviews the draft operating capital budgets for the city's program, services, or departments under their mandate and makes recommendations regarding their draft budgets, which are forwarded to council for consideration. After all standing committees have reviewed and made recommendations regarding their draft budgets, council reviews all budget recommendations at the same time. After council has reviewed and voted on the committee budget recommendations, the city's budget is finally adopted. Next slide, please. So this year, if I haven't already mentioned that, the tabling of the budget will be on November 13th, and I believe the voting or the adoption date will be on December 11th. So this year, we're going to talk a little bit about the committee budget and the deliberation. So you can see we have City Council at the top, and then we have the various committees, and we have and commissions. And you can see the various dates after the budget tabling, which is on November the 13th. They will be having deliberations on each of their specific budgets that fall under their mandate, right? So the budget books will be organized by each standing committee, and they will have meetings in which they will debate what has been presented in terms of a draft budget, and they're free to make adjustments and or recommendations to that budget as they see fit. Next slide, please. Okay, 2025 budget enhancements. So enhancements that were made for the 2025 budget were based on feedback from the 2024 budget, or since the 2024 budget adoption. The goal of these enhancements is to improve budget literacy and improve engagement by removing barriers to participate. Enhancements are listed on the slide. Some of the enhancements, are listed on the slide, but of note, some enhancements are today's technical briefing, introducing an improved 2025 Draft Budget Explorer with enhanced reporting and online content. Ultimately, we're looking to create an understanding of the investments being made across our services and programs that serve our community. So let me just break that down a little bit. So we do have, in terms of feedback that we've received from the public, is the budget books and documents are very big, and there's a lot of information in them. We are extremely large city, lots of service, lots of various departments, lots of various programs, lots of things that are happening. So in order to help folks better understand how the city is investing its money, we've made a simple tool that is now online, available online through the Engage Ottawa page, that you can actually access, that will actually show you how the city is investing its funds. And you can go committee by committee and see how much each committee has purview of in terms of the budget, or the budget that they oversee for those particular departments. You can see the investments that are being made into various programs and so on and so forth. So it's fairly simple. It's click and, you can sort of drill into each section and into each committee and into each service to better understand the investments that are going to each of those different pieces. So I hope that's a little bit better than what I just read. Okay, let's move on to the next piece. Term of council priorities. So all these pieces here make up our components of the budget. So the 2025 draft budget will ensure that it highlights its alignment to the term of council priorities that are seen on the slide here. So term of council priorities for this term of council are four. They're simple. We would like to build a city that has an affordable housing for all and is livable for all. A city that is more connected with reliable, safe, and accessible mobility options. A city that is green and resilient, and a city with diversified and prosperous economy. Next slide, please. Okay, I guess we can jump on to the next one, which actually means that we've actually concluded our presentation, and we'll hold the questions. If you have any questions on the process or any of the steps that we've talked about, hold those questions and we'll have an opportunity to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for the in-depth presentation and for the work that the city's finance department undertakes on an ongoing basis to really design a budget that drives the priorities of the city. The next presentation will be from Shanna, who will present on initiatives from the city's Community and Social Services Department.
So I'll keep my water with me. I have a bit of a cough, a tickle in my throat. Sorry, Joseph. So first, so I'm Shanna Culhane. I'm the Acting Director for Gender and Race Equity, Inclusion, Indigenous Relations, and Social Development. I say that many times a day, so I get used to the long title. So first, I'll just provide a bit of an overview around what my service area does within community and social services, so that you can understand the work that my team and I are responsible for. And then I think we'll get into some questions afterwards related to what you're all here for. So under my purview, we have the anti-racism strategy. As you know, we have 132 actions that were approved by council a couple of years ago, back in 2022, to action as part of the anti-racism strategy on behalf of the city. We also have the Women and Gender Equity Strategy, which was approved in 2021. which has a number of actions that have been completed, about 67% to date. So it's been a very successful strategy that we're responsible for implementing. We also, under Maria, have the Corporate Diversity and Inclusion Plan, which is another equity strategy that we have at the city that's more internally focused on our employee or our workforce within the city of Ottawa. So about 17,000 employees, and really trying to create a safe work environment for all of our employees at the city where they feel included and they feel a sense of belonging, and addressing some of the barriers that they face in the workplace, which also includes potential applicants for jobs with the City of Ottawa, which often comes up in my conversations with the community as well, and how we're addressing those barriers so that any resident within the City of Ottawa, the little city, can apply and potentially become employed with us as an employer. We also have the Reconciliation Action Plan, which is part of the Indigenous Relations branch, which also sits under my purview. So we have about 4 equity strategies right now at the city that we're responsible for implementing, and about roughly, don't quote me on the number, 240 actions between the 3 equity strategies in particular. So it's a very robust and lofty goals in terms of achieving an anti-racist city within the City of Ottawa. Also under my purview, but very related, is the Community Funding Framework, which is a portfolio that includes about $30 million that's distributed to the community each and every year, to a number of community agencies that are really addressing the highest priority needs on behalf of the community, based on the consultations that we've taken place with community providers and residents. So that's under Cynthia, which she'll speak to later, I'm sure, as you have questions. In addition, we also have the Integrated Neighborhood Services team, which sits under Cynthia as well, where we have staff that are working in about 31 priority neighborhoods across the city. And so that's really the boots on the ground employees that are working within different facilities across the city to kind of tackle some of the barriers that the community is facing within their particular neighborhood. And in addition, I'll just mention, because we have Councillor Kavanaugh here, who's one of the co-liaisons for the older adult plan. We also have the older adult plan, which is not necessarily an equity strategy per se, but there are definitely connections between the actions that we need to take for older adults in our city and the work that we're doing under the anti-racism, women and gender equity strategies in particular. So I just want to mention that. And the other co-liaison is Councillor Hubley, that works alongside Councillor Kavanaugh for the older adult plan, so that you're aware of that. So that's very high level, just providing a bit of an overview around the various strategies and plans that are under my purview with my team. So maybe I'll just speak very high level just about some of the work that's happened over the last year and some of the investments. So in particular, with the 3 equity strategies, and some of you may have already heard this in other meetings, so I apologize for being repetitive to you. The 3 equity strategies have been evaluated earlier this year, and really the purpose of that was to streamline the work that we're doing under the 3 equity strategies. So each strategy really was approved independently of one another. They were not necessarily communicating with each other in the past. There was some overlap and duplication between the priorities of each of the equity strategies. So we undertook with an external consultant to do an evaluation of all 3 and really assess how successful have we been over the last couple of years. As you know, each of those strategies were approved during a period of time of high stress in a pandemic with COVID. This is a relatively new service area that I'm responsible for, that was created in 2019. So there are a number of new staff that were hired externally from the city to join the team for their expertise, really, in terms of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. But they also still need to learn and grow in terms of the organizational knowledge at the city and how we're able to influence change across the corporation with the other departments and with the community involved. So that was the reason for undertaking the evaluation. And so what we found through the evaluation was really it validated some of our concerns around the connectivity between the three equity strategies and really needing to be intentional around what have we been successful with so far and how do we build upon those successes moving forward, and really listen and engage with the community to make sure that the actions that move forward for the next 2-year period for the remaining term of council are the actions that we're hearing the community would like to advance. And so that work has just recently completed. There will be a very detailed report to committee and council. It will go to Financial Services Committee on November 5th and then to City Council on November 13th. It is very lengthy, about 25 pages, but I would encourage you all to take the time and read that report. It will really give you more depth in terms of why we undertook the evaluation, what were the successes that we've had so far, and where there may be gaps or opportunities to build upon those successes moving forward for the next couple of years, and really listening to the community to make sure that we're on track with what we should be achieving for the next couple of years. And then, of course, undertaking evaluations along the way a couple years from now. And the other piece is really developing a performance measurement framework. So having an overarching framework that will help us to measure our success moving forward. Data is not necessarily something that we're all very strong at. And so we need to really make a concentrated effort there to show that we are achieving what we set out to achieve under all of the equity strategies. And if we're not on track, course correcting before we're too far down the road. And so that's kind of the focus of the evaluations that have recently taken place. And I'll just speak very high level to some of the investments over the last couple of years since I've been in the role. So in 2024, my service area in particular received about $1.8 million. So that was an increase in our base budget funding, as Joseph has just explained. 1.1 million of that went to the sustainability fund under the community funding envelopes. So we have about 6 envelopes under community funding that goes out to the community. And so that's where a good portion of that increase went. For the anti-racism strategy, as Councillor King mentioned, we had the Black-led community initiatives, which was for Black youth this year in 2024, $120,000, which is an ongoing fund. So it will not end. It will continue into next year and beyond. And we were able to develop a financial literacy program for youth in the community, and 120 youth were able to graduate with the support of some community agencies that delivered that program on our behalf, and they're in the room. So thank you for that. It was a very successful initiative. For the Corporate Diversity and Inclusion Plan, which is the internal plan that I mentioned that really fosters an inclusive work environment for our 17,000 employees across the city. We committed $150,000 in 2024 to support workplace initiatives. And so really what that means is we focused on learning and development opportunities for employees, as well as developing our affinity groups, which are staff-led at the city. And there's about 12, I believe, off the top of my head, 12 affinity groups across the city. And so this year, we actually were able to dedicate funding to them to be able to hold learning and development events for all of our employee populations, which is something that we haven't had before. And that was very successful. And then last year, we also received funding to make 3 of the positions that were within my service area permanent that support the anti-racism strategy and the women and gender equity strategy. So as I mentioned, our service area is fairly new. It was created in 2019, and some of those roles have been temporary in nature. All of the roles that sit within the anti-racism secretariat, are held by employees that are diverse and have lived experience. So we have about 12 employees on that team right now that report to Maria. And so we were able to actually solidify 3 additional employees from that team into permanent positions over the last year because of that investment, which helps us to stabilize in terms of being able to achieve under all of the equity strategies. So that was very positive. So for 2025, what I've requested, and this is a moving target, as you know, through the budget process, and it's very precarious right now with some of, I'm sure you've seen in the media in terms of the transit pressures and other pressures at the city. So just want to kind of state that this is subject to change. So based on what I've requested for right now, I have asked for $150,000 one time in 2025 to support the development and implementation of an anti-hate campaign for the city of Ottawa. And so that's in relation to the rising hate and hate crimes that have been happening in the community, unfortunately, and the subsequent motion that Councillor King put forth at City Council. And so we're really wanting to implement a 3-year anti-hate campaign as a starting place and developing that anti-hate campaign in collaboration with the community and the voices of the community. So we're looking for an investment of $150,000 for this year as a starting place to help us support with that work. In addition to that, just so you're aware, through Maria and her team, we are having conversations with community providers and organizations in the community around what other funding grants may be available. For example, there's a provincial grant, there's a federal grant as well. And so we're providing letters of support to organizations in order to be able to potentially access and be approved for funding through those grants at the provincial and federal level, so that we can kind of combine our efforts as a community in developing that anti-hate campaign for learning and awareness to address the rising hate across the city. So that one is really of great importance to us as a team. The other thing I'm asking for under the Corporate Diversity and Inclusion Plan is $150,000 maintained to support the workplace initiatives, which is the money that I mentioned that was one time this year in 2024 to support our workforce. So the 17,000 employees with learning and development events, as well as the affinity groups. So I would like to see that continue because we have exhausted that money in the first year that it was available to us. So it's very much needed to support a healthy and inclusive workplace. And the other thing that I've requested is $200,000 to hire an external consultant who's an expert in equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging to develop mandatory anti-racism, anti-oppression training for all of our leaders in the organization. And so that will be part of the report that goes forward in November that I'm encouraging you all to read, of 25 pages. But essentially, what I'm looking to do is to develop a learning and development strategy that supports mandatory training for all leaders. So starting at City Council level, down to the senior leader level, so general managers and directors, so people of my level, down to managers, frontline supervisors, and so on. So that would start in 2025 in the first quarter and continue into 2026, likely given the number of employees we have in leadership positions across the organization. And then I would like to adapt that mandatory training for all employees in the organization. And so this goes to part of the rationale behind the report around the city having a shared accountability and responsibility to address equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging on behalf of our community. So internally, we need to look inside our house first and make sure that we've educated our leaders around how they remove these barriers within our workplace. And that translates to better service, programs, services, access for residents at the City of Ottawa. And then the other thing we're asking for this year is another inflationary increase for the community funding envelope of approximately $840,000 right now to support the community funded agencies that are currently receiving sustainability funding out of that $30 million envelope. So that is very high level, the investments for the last 2 years. So maybe I'll stop there, Councillor, and
Excellent. Thank you so much for providing that context. It's important for the public and for residents to understand the work that's been undertaken by staff, and we appreciate that work. it really does reflect the direction that the community had provided around the anti-racism strategy and office and the direction it should take. And I know that in your comments, you mentioned, the need for funding by agencies. And we've been having conversations with Black-led social service agencies about the need for greater funding and the need for greater tools for advocacy. So I'm also really pleased to have the opportunity to ask Bo to speak based on some of the conversations that we had over the summer with different social service organizations.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. Just like to say thank you to everybody for inviting me up here to have this conversation. And it's well overdue, I suspect. So my name is Bo Turpin. I'm the Executive Director of Upstream Ottawa Mental Health Community Supports. We're an organization that provides, ministry funded to provide intensive case management supports to people in the city of Ottawa. And we also have a program called SAPACY, which stands for the Substance Abuse Program for African, Canadian, and Caribbean Youth. I'll now dive into my speech because I don't want to make sure I miss anything. So I would like to mention that there's a few of our executives here as well. There's Marlon Wall standing in the back, or sitting in the back. She's the Executive Director of the Child and Youth Permanency Council of Canada. And we have Tony Jacob. She's the Executive Director of the ACB Wellness Center, just not in this ward. And we also have Suzanne Obiara. So she's the Executive Director of Somerset West Community Health Center. Sorry, she's not in the room, so she sends her regrets. Sorry, I should have started with the regrets piece. And last but not least, online is Papa Lajike Diouf. So he's a clinical lead at the Ottawa Salus and lead of the Ottawa Black Mental Health Coalition. Now, before I delve into the work of the Ottawa Black Coalition, it's crucial to understand the context in which Black residents live. The reality for many Black citizens that racism remains a persistent and prevalent issue in our city, particularly in these times of rising populism or global populism, as we've just heard earlier. So to be clear, this isn't just about individual acts of prejudice, but a deeper, more nefarious systemic problem that permeates through our institutions and daily lives. According to Stats Can, from 2021 to 2024, 51% of racialized people aged 15 years and older reported experiencing some form of discrimination or unfair treatment within the 5 years prior to the survey. So this is nearly double of the 20% of the population that recorded that were non-racialized that reported the same kind of discrimination. So locally, that means that we've got about 8.3 to 8.7% Black population here in the city of Ottawa. So we're talking about 84,000 people plus. So 43,000 of those individuals have experienced subjectively some kind of treatment. So having been treated with less respect than others, having received poorer service at restaurants, stores, facilities, and institutions, did not obtain employment or equitable recognition for their work, faced assumptions about their intelligence or honesty, they experienced fear or aggression from others, been subjected to insults, belittlement, or even threats. The consequences of systemic racism are far-reaching and deeply concerning, and it directly results in Black people in Ottawa experiencing higher rates of poverty and unemployment, face challenges in accessing adequate housing, and are at a higher risk of homelessness. Food insecurity remains a persistent, pressing issue for many Black families. And speaking with Tony today, she does have a food cupboard that receives food from the food bank, and it's been cut drastically. And we've been connecting and trying to figure out how we're going to bridge that gap, because there's so many families going without food, and it's a very persistent issue. And we experience significant disparities in health outcomes with Black individuals at higher risk for chronic illnesses and diseases. And that's something that Ottawa Public Health would attest to as well. So these inequities are not the result of individual actions alone, but of deeply entrenched systems that support bias and which require coordinated, intentional, and strategic effort to identify and eradicate. This is where the Ottawa Black Coalition comes in. We're a formal alliance of Black-led and Black-serving organizations united in our mission to drive meaningful change for Ottawa's Black community. Our coalition aims to empower communities by strengthening the social, economic, and political power of Black communities through coordinated efforts. We aim to support member organizations by providing training, resources, and a collaborative platform to enhance the capacity of Black nonprofits, Black-led nonprofits. And finally, we aim to enhance visibility by unifying Black organizations to present a collective voice in influencing policy change. Our work closely aligns with and will build on the City of Ottawa's 5-year anti-racism strategy, and we're committed to addressing all 7 pillars of the strategy, which includes governance, housing, economic development, health outcomes, children and youth development, achieving racial equity in the workplace, and institutional practices. What sets the Ottawa Black Community or Coalition rather apart from our dynamic is our dynamic approach. Pardon me. We aim to bring together diverse organizations in the social services spaces and beyond to address the significant gaps at the intersections of health, mental health and substance use health, housing, justice, income, education, and employment, each with its own expertise and focus to create a united front in addressing the complex challenges faced by the Black community. This collaboration allows us to share and inform expertise, advocate more effectively for policy changes, leverage our combined networks for greater reach, develop stronger organizational strategies and practices, and reduce the burden on individual organizations. We understand that trust is essential in any partnership. That's why we, as an organization, or as a coalition rather, are committed to regular reporting and open communication with our members, partners, and stakeholders, strict financial management and annual audits, a clear governance structure with a duly elected executive committee beginning at our first AGM, a robust code of conduct for all members and organizations is mandatory as well. Now I turn to you, our city leaders. The Ottawa Black Coalition represents a unique opportunity to the city to partner with an organized, accountable, and deeply committed group of organizations in building a more equitable city for all. We're asking for your support in leveraging several key areas. Funding to help us scale our efforts and support our forward momentum to begin engaging and building our membership base. Collaboration to work with us in deconstructing systemic racial barriers in the city, in cities, institutions, and beyond, thus resulting in a meaningful change to members of the Black community. Policy support to further champion policies and accountabilities that promote equity and inclusion. And recognition and to acknowledge the Ottawa Black Coalition as a key partner in the city's anti-Black racism efforts. So in closing, I want to emphasize that the work of the Ottawa Black Coalition is not for the benefit of the Black community only. When we address systemic racism and create a more equitable system, we build a stronger, more vibrant city for all residents. By supporting the Ottawa Black Coalition, you're investing in a more just, more equitable, and more prosperous future for the city. We stand ready to work with you to bring our collective expertise and passion to the table and to create meaningful, lasting change in Ottawa. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bo, for talking about the advent of the coalition. I think it really does demonstrate the impact of having continuous dialogue with community members, residents, as well as social service agencies. I know the genesis of the idea came as we were talking about opportunities, financing opportunities for Black-led organizations. And it's wonderful to see this idea that emerged organically start really to take some permanent form and shape. And I think it's important for us to see more organizations that are articulating the needs in terms of gaps, in terms of the requirements, especially for the delivery of social services. So thank you so much, and thank you to many of the people in the room here. I know we're going to now start with our questions. So I will let Sophia lead off this Q&A opportunity, but we thought it was going to be very important to articulate what has been evolving in the community, which I think is very positive. So not just on the policy front, but also in terms of advocacy for additional resources, not just from the municipal government, but I think also importantly from senior levels of government. And I think that there is some receptiveness at Queen's Park. I've been having some discussions as well with the satellite office of the Premier here in Ottawa about the gaps in terms of funding in the city of Ottawa for diverse communities, as well, frankly, across Eastern Ontario. And I think the more voices that we have articulating the need, the better it will be for our community. So I want to thank you and thank many in this room who are working on that other piece. I'm working with staff on ensuring that we can do more in terms of the resources that we have, but I think it's also important for us to advocate for even more resources from those levels of government that can actually borrow for other operations. So it's very important to us. So thank you so much. And now I will go to Sophia for moderating the question and answer period.
Thank you, Councillor King, and thank you to all of our presenters. We appreciate your words. We are going to do the Q&A. We just want to let everyone know that everyone will be able to ask a question as much as possible. You'll have 2 minutes for your question and a minute for follow-up for a maximum of 3 minutes. We sent out a survey with the sign-up sheet, and so we did have a couple people that said they'd like to ask questions. So I'd love to call Chandra Jones, Alem Legacy, Hector Addison, I think it's Future Paths Network, Pascal, and of course, Bo had also said that if you guys can just line up here, you guys are first on this list, and then if you have any other questions, and if folks have questions, they can also line up, but we're taking these folks first because they did answer the survey. Again, please keep your question short. And so then the folks who you're asking the question to will be able to respond. There is a time limit. Okay, so our first person. Yeah, it was Chandra Alem. Chanda? Oh, Chanda, I'm sorry. Chanda? And then Alem. Sorry, I apologize for the mistake. Okay, so you're first.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll got it. Well, hello, everyone. So my question, because this was also phenomenal, I want to thank you guys for presenting today and everything too as well, and for the opportunity. So my question was something along the lines of supporting grassroots organizations. So like we know that like there are reoccurring organizations that access funding all the time, and that's phenomenal with all the work that's happening. But when I look around, especially like being one of the few youngest people in here, there's also other organizations that are non-for-profit, grassroots, up and coming, and they're youth. So like, while this is amazing, how are we also supporting youth in terms of like them having access to funding opportunities and also just being able to compete with other organizations that consistently get reoccurring funding to do their programs and planning? So yeah.
Thank you for that question. I don't know if staff can answer that.
Mike, thank you. So thank you, Shanda, for your question. I can speak about the community funding framework for the city. So the community funding allocates about $30 million a year, and about 28 million of those are directed in the sustainability fund. So the sustainability fund supports currently like 95 organizations, and it's a very unique funding stream in the city in the sense that it supports core funding and programming and project funding. So sustainability allows like core funding for the rent, the utilities, like anything an agency needs to do to deliver on its mission. And that is why it's our biggest envelope, because that's really where like agencies can benefit from the funding. So we have, in 2022, we reopened the sustainability fund, and we onboarded 16 new agencies, mostly smaller grassroots organization. But at the beginning of the work. Like the Sustainability Fund will reopen in 2026 for 2027, and the whole process will be designed with an equity like policy or strong equity lens, so that really the money is invested where the impact is the greatest. So that's one big opportunity coming up. The community funding also have multiple funding streams that are open throughout the year. Currently, we have the project funding in collaboration with the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan that has youth and priority neighborhood as priorities. And it's a $1.4 million that can either go into programming or capacity building for the organization. So that is really a great opportunity to get an organization serving equity serving group or Black residents with capacity building projects. So we're very excited about that. Anything else? Emerging needs. Yeah, so another envelopes that we have are emerging needs that can allocate funding to an emerging needs. To a need in the community or crisis in the community that requires immediate action that is not covered by the current resources. Another thing I wanted to say is that, so the community funding framework has been redeveloped and launched new in 2022. We've committed to do a full review of the plan after 10 years, but we're not waiting 10 years to do that. Like later this fall, so probably in November, we're starting a midterm review for the community funding framework. And the midterm review is an excellent opportunity to engage with us. We'll have focus group, we'll have surveys, we'll have information sessions. So you'll hear about that, because that's an opportunity to refine the operations. So what are the barriers into accessing funding? What are the needs that is not currently answered? And how can we reframe the operations to be better responsive to the needs? We work currently with a fixed envelope until we approve a bigger budget. But our focus on the midterm review is making sure that that funding goes to where the needs are. I know I only have like 1 minute to answer, but if you do not, like if you are part of an organization that could benefit from funding and you're not receiving the newsletter or like the information that is sent when a funding happen, email us at communityfunding@ottawa.ca, communityfunding@ottawa.ca. We'll add you on our distribution list, so you'll be aware every time a funding stream opens.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for your question. We're going to go, well, I'll come to you in a second. We're going to go to Zoom for any questions there. Michelle?
We have Morgan. Her hand is raised. I've just asked her
Morgan?
to unmute. Or,
Awesome.
sorry, Morgan.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and obviously to the staff and the city councilors. I think this is great and give you a great opportunity to the community to participate. My question, to keep it brief, is as a member of the YMCA of the National Capital Region, we are very interested to participate. And I hear from the staff and from the city councilor there is a framework developed for 2025. So how we can see and take part of that, how we can collaborate, and certainly that come along with the bigger impact that you are seeing. And probably my question is more framed about how we can participate to ensure programs that we deliver in our community are well aligned with what you are seeing is that framework. And I will give it an example. When we put in place programs like housing or childcare or for employment and e-commerce services, we are thinking in the end how that end will benefit our community members. So my question is, to summarize, how we can participate actively, how we can see that framework, and how we can make sure that priority that you are seeing can be translated to programs and service that communities like the YMCA are offering right now. Thank you.
Is the mic on? Just click the bottom.
Thank you. Sorry, Morgan. Thank you for your question. I thought it was on. So first and foremost, you can reach out to me directly. I'm happy to meet with you and we can talk about those opportunities under the equity strategies and what those partnerships might look like. I've already been having several conversations with community organizations and members around the path forward related to anti-racism, women and gender equity and the corporate diversity inclusion plan. So we need to continue those conversations and collaborating together so that we're hearing the voices of the community. I just wanted to mention, you had mentioned economic development very briefly. So there is a program under economic development, the Community Economic Development Funding Program. And so we do work with them very closely as part of the anti-racism strategy, as part of some of the actions, 132 actions we need to address. And so they do have a small pot of money to support underserved communities, which includes Black entrepreneurs and youth, for example. So there is a program for an annual budget of $280,000 to nonprofit organizations that have 2 years of financial statements that can submit applications for potential projects. So I just want to mention that because I think that's relevant to also to the last question. And that's in addition to some of the other work that's already happening in the community with Ottawa Community Funding, Michelle Jean Foundation, other nonprofits like Ottawa Black Business Alliance, the Association of Black Entrepreneurs, and the Changemaker Hub as an example, as well as Invest Ottawa. So I just wanted to reference that, but please, Morgan, if you want to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to set that up.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Morgan, for your question. We're moving on.
Hi, my name is Adam Lagasa, and thank you for the excellent presentation and the work you do for sure. My question will be about the employment, education, and the barriers. We know that the Black Coalition heard it for the first time. They just presented that there is high number of youth unemployment in Black and Indigenous folks. And despite that, we have about 2,000 high-tech companies, and we are extremely underrepresented as Black and Indigenous people in the tech sector. And on the top of that, the tsunami that's coming, which is AI, you hear it everywhere. And Councillor King was in our event, and there were high return, great questions. So how do we prepare specifically in the next 5 years, according to Harvard Business Review, 50% of the jobs will be disappearing to AI automation. So Black people, they are extremely underrepresented. They are not ready. They don't have awareness. So how do we prepare, in terms of providing skills, in terms of, explaining opportunities, the barriers, the limitation, so that nobody is left behind? Thank you.
I'll answer that very briefly. That's an excellent question. And I know, you've been a massive supporter of ensuring that we can create more workforce opportunities and employment opportunities for our youth. And I'm really pleased that the city is looking at youth engagement under both its community safety and well-being plan, as well as the anti-racism strategy. And what we have identified, and there are a group of counselors who are involved in this conversation, is how do we link to youth to a lot of opportunities that are actually out there in the community. And so we're going to look at different models. You're going to see that coming soon, especially around forums and networking opportunities that directly reach out to youth in marginalized communities and connect them to a lot of the programming that's out there. We actually held earlier or mid this year, so before the summer, we held a youth leadership breakfast with Black History Ottawa as example. And what we did was we ensured that we brought different organizations who are running amazing initiatives for youth together with the youth were really excited. They could leverage the opportunities. They were learning about the opportunities. They were able to network with one another. So we are going to have continuing conversations both with city staff and our economic development agency, Invest Ottawa, to see if there are greater ways to actually bring the youth to the programming. They will embrace the programming. They need to know that it's available for them. There's a lot of programs that are available for them. So I just want you to know that we are actively working on what you're suggesting, and it's of vital importance, because that is economic opportunities for our community that would lead to self-reliance. So I think we need to focus on self-reliance wherever we can, and building wealth internally in the community, as well as building community wealth. So I thank you for that question, but I want you to know that we are working on it, and we are going to give you a call as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That we need to connect, and we need to be purposeful, focusful, and with clarity.
Right. Thank you so much. We'll take another question from the floor, and then I'm coming to Zoom.
Thank you. My name is Pascal Kanyemera, and I'm going to ask a question about the public health. Ottawa is doing an outstanding job to welcome the newcomers to this country. And we keep talking about the housing, which is a really good thing that you guys are doing. But there's an area that I would like to ask about the Black mental health for the newcomers to this country. They always say you can run, you can outrun something that's running behind you, but you cannot outrun something that's running inside you. You have so many newcomers who are coming from war-torn countries, especially in Africa. They come to this country, they give them a housing, find a job, start working, but nobody ever talk about that mental health of the newcomers. And I'm saying this as someone who's coming from the Rwanda community here in Ottawa. In the last 2 years, we have lost 4 young people who jumped in the Gatineau River, and we have no doubt that it's because of the mental illness they had, that it was never taken care of. And I'm just asking, in 2025, does anybody ever talk about allocating a budget about that specific issue of raising and educating people, and also about taking care of their mental health? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. And it's a very important one. And I can say that there is advocacy that's ongoing, both within the sector. So the Ottawa Black Mental Health Coalition is working very hard in terms of building a framework and a plan to provide services. And I can tell you that there's been personal advocacy on my behalf to the provincial government to say, the largest portfolio that we have at the province is around health. And we need to have better investments around mental health, especially for our diverse communities. So I want you to know that we have been asking that question. We want to see at a political level, obviously, an expansion of this programming, because what you had just outlined breaks not just my heart, but all of our hearts. We shouldn't lose one youth. And we understand that there are, unbelievable things that newcomers have experienced in their home countries, and that needs to be addressed. Mental health is a continuum. So one of the key things that the coalition is working on, as well as breaking the stigma, to ensure that youth or anybody within the community does take advantage of resources to get better and to improve their mental health on that continuum. But we need the resources in order to do it. So I fully agree with you. I just want you to know that, while it isn't always a direct responsibility of municipal government, we are working with partners to ensure that we enhance the resources around mental health, especially for the Black communities.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for your question. We're going to go to Zoom. Michelle, do you have a question on Zoom?
I have no questions at the moment unless someone raises their hand.
Okay, perfect. I'll continue with the floor here. Your next question.
Thank you so much. I'm Hector. I'm a Chief Servant of African Canadian Association of Ottawa. And thank you so much for the work you guys are doing. I do not envy the work you do at all. It's a lot of work. And I think I echo what my brother just said. That was one of the questions I was going to ask, because as you guys know, we got a lot of funding from the emergency, what is it called, that you just put up, right? And the work we're going from shelter to shelter, and we're working with youth. And these are people who are mostly immigrants, right, from Africa. And they are in these shelters. Some of them have been living in these shelters 6, 7 years, right? As you all know, there was a problem with Travelodge on the Carlin there. We advocated for it. Now it's basically shut down. The people were moved to the west side. Okay, we've been following these people, and then we realized that mental health is really a big concern. Sometimes when we go in, they realize that these youth, they don't have a space to do their homeworks, right? So we distributed a few Chromebooks that we were able to assemble to them, but the need is so great, and that means we need more resources. I will assume that the city is racking up a lot of money from these traffic cameras all over the place. You see the traffic cameras all over the place. At least I have paid over $1,000. But maybe some of those monies can be sort of repurposed or put in more of this sustainable funding. So for many community organizations to be able to access sustainable funding instead of just 1 year or 6 months or whatever one of funding, right? We need sustainable funding in our community. We all know Black organizations are precariously funded, from whether it's from the federal government, provincial government, or the city. So we want something to be done. So the financial guy, yeah, you guys can do something.
Well,
Thank you for your comment.
Hector, thank you for your comment. I would just quickly say this. It's really a question of advocacy, especially around our newcomers. I know that our mayor is having conversations with the federal government, because it's their responsibility to ensure that proper resources are provided to the municipality to support newcomers and new immigrants. And we're doing the best that we can at the city, but we need the senior levels of government to step up here, because it is their responsibility, and it causes a lot of pressure on our existing systems. We should not have newcomers in the shelter system. But we're seeing that because there are gaps in terms of the investments from the federal government. So we're going to continue to have those discussions to ensure that we advocate for those resources. I completely agree with you, but we shouldn't be in a position where we're looking at fines that are levied for traffic infractions to fund those types of programs. That's unacceptable. So we need to have those investments. This is one of the reasons why I'm really pleased to see the advent of this coalition, which I think will be able to give voice to these types of issues. And I just want to assure you that when I talk to different counterparts, I have a good working relationship with all the provincial and federal counterparts within this catchment area, Rideau-Vanier. We have these types of discussions and we relay these types of concerns. So I just want you to know that, but I don't disagree with you. We need more resources, but we need to have a sufficient stream to support the needs. And I can guarantee that even if we could allocate fines, that's not going to be enough. We need something that's substantive. But thank you for your advocacy. I think Akawa's voice is very strong. I was hearing your voice on Friday all afternoon on CBC. I think we need to continue to be very strong in our messaging in terms of the needs of the community. And I'm really thankful that we have a strong community organizations that do that here in Ottawa for us.
Thank you so much, Councillor, and thank you, Hector, for your comments. We're doing really good on time, everybody. So next question, please.
So the question I had tabled was fairly simple and broad, which was what funds are being specifically set aside for Black populations in this budget? And the reason I'm asking, and I know we've touched on that here and there, but it would be really good maybe as a comms product or exercise for the city to go through, is to have one place where the community could look at to say, well, this is the money that's being provided. And it probably is. So if it exists, I apologize. But again, it would be really helpful, looking at it from, a planning perspective, and as, thinking about the launch of the coalition and working with other partners like ACAO and everybody else in the room, quite frankly, we need to know what's available. And then also you get a sense of, well, that's the, the local capital investment. But what are the, the provincial pieces and the federal pieces that we can then start to charge after?
Agreed. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's green. Is it green? Yeah.
Okay, thank you both. Seem to be having a problem with the mic. So no, I totally agree. And so one of the recommendations that's coming forth in the equity report that's coming on November 5th and 13th is that first, in addition to the framework and the performance measurement aspects of the work, we also need to develop a communication strategy around how we communicate on the 3 equity strategies and what have we been able to accomplish, what are the gaps, what are the opportunities, and so on. And so we're actually in the process right now of working with an external provider to help us in developing a marketing tool. So I'm calling it an annual report card around the 3 equity strategies, so we can very clearly articulate what have we been able to achieve, where are we going, like what is our end goal in terms of that. So yeah, that's exactly what we need to be doing. So I'm glad to hear that from you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Hey, Rawlson. Robin Brown from the 613-819 Blackout. Thank you for everything you do, man. I told you my questions. You know what it is, right? But I'll say it here. So given that the policing is not one of the city's 4 priorities, right? Not even public safety, actually, right? And that the Auto Police Service published its 10 years of race-based traffic stop data that showed not only are things not getting better, they've gotten worse over 10 years in terms of the Auto Police stopping Black people. And given their own data shows they're still using force disproportionately on Black people, and most importantly, have no plan to stop doing that. And that the police budget is $400 million and their dry cleaning budget is $500,000. And your budget is 1.8 million? 30 million, okay, compared to 400. My brother, will you vote against the police budget?
So as I was saying to you before, Robin, before I vote on anything, I listen to everybody. And I also take policy analysis very seriously. We ask questions of every department, including the police service, before I make a decision. So I always believe in, it's a question of the chicken before the egg and that type of thing. I think it's important for us to listen to community members and to listen to your analysis, frankly, before I make a decision. Of course, there is the record of how I voted based on that analysis. And it's always my, preference to ensure that dollars go into prevention rather than reaction. And I frankly see law enforcement as reaction. If it reaches the criminal justice system, then we failed not just the system, but as a society, in my estimation. This is my philosophical view. So I would rather see dollars placed into preventative measures that actually improve the quality of life for communities and provide communities with better prospects. So that's always my view. My view is also around innovation, around budgets. As you know, in the past term, when I was on Police Services Board, I was able to convince colleagues to reduce the budget so that we could have space for other social service types of innovations. And so I think it's important for us, if we are serious about reimagining law enforcement in our city, to really be open to those ideas, and not just open to the ideas, because I'll be very honest with you, there are people in the police command who are open to those ideas, but I think that we need to accelerate them. Because if we don't accelerate them, then we will continue to see poor performance over the 10-year timeframe. So one of the things that I was proud of when I was on Police Services Board was at least trying to set a direction around improving equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout the service. And I worked hard with my colleagues and convinced many of my colleagues to really move in that direction. So I would say, my past history might dictate how I might vote. But I'm very serious with everybody. People sometimes get mad at me on land use issues files in the ward because they're saying, they're saying, well, Councillor Rawlson, why aren't you just opposing this right away? And I said, what I'd rather do if we have a major file, major policies, we sit down with people. I think of this official plan amendment in the neighborhood near here. We sat down, read 500 comments. We held 3 meetings with 100 people each. We took tours with people. And then we actually came out with a white paper. So we did analysis of the policy question that was before us in terms of the land use issue. And at the end of the day, that person who was angry with me said, I'm actually quite satisfied with the decision that you made because I think it was reasoned and you used a rational process to get there. So it's always my tendency to listen to the people before I make a decision. So I do that with every file, every vote, in fact, that I take at council. But I think, that doesn't, notwithstanding that, there's a specific ideological and philosophical view that I have that I think is well known, but I don't like to presuppose decisions. I want to ensure that we have discussions that also potentially result in change, because I can say without a doubt, in that last term when we had that budget discussion, we were not initially going to reduce the budget. It required some discussion with colleagues, some compromise, and some analysis of what could be done with the dollars that were made available to invest in social services in the city. So I just like being honest with people. I like analysis before a decision. And I also like clearly really, rationalizing that decision and explaining those decisions to my constituents.
Thank you, Councillor.
Hello. First things first, I just want to say thank you all for the work that you do for the city in terms of managing the budget and ensuring that Ottawa adheres to a city that is both equitable, diverse, and inclusive. With that, my question flows from the understanding of Canada's direction by 2030 in terms of sustainable development goals and meeting them. Now, in terms of the city of Ottawa itself, what is being done to ensure that organizations who are actively pursuing these sustainable goals to ensure that the community is more inclusive, to ensure that the community is more diverse and more equitable to all, what funds are being done to support them, and also at the same time, what is being done for the youth in order to understand what these sustainable goals are so that they are able to contribute back to the city in and of itself, and also at the same time allow Ottawa to become that center wherein youth are, as they go on to other areas in life, they themselves are actively or become active participants in their community, creating change. So that's just my question.
Well, I can say this, and I'll be brief because I think that might require a bit of follow-up from also environmental and climate change staff. But I can say this, it's the youth who are driving a lot of pressure on us to make change, and we actually do appreciate that. I think it's important for there to be that pressure to ensure that we work towards plans, especially around climate and addressing climate change. And in fact, we have a climate change master plan. I know that when I first came into office, these things were under development, but we have really listened to the community in terms of creating a plan. Now, the challenge with the plan is financing it, because has to come from, because you could look at the plan and say that this actually falls within some of the sustainability development goals that have been enumerated by the UN and others. But the reality is that the municipality, as we just heard from our finance staff, doesn't have unlimited dollars to deal with everything. So the conversations that we've had that have been especially driven by youth have resulted in other areas and other sectors stepping up to help with those investments because this is multi-sectoral. It's not just the municipal government. It's going to require industry. It's going to require everyone to address these goals. But I think what's exciting is that you are seeing industry and other sectors step up. In terms of the municipal sector, we have a fund that I actually sit on the board of, the Ottawa Climate Action Fund, that has a small amount of capital that helps capitalize different types of projects that will result in massive reductions in greenhouse gases. So we're looking at wet systems, actually using sewage infrastructure to heat entire new subdivisions, in a sense, or new developments downtown, new districts downtown. We are looking at plans to invest in EV charging and other car sharing opportunities in Ottawa community housing communities. So people who might not be able to afford a car on a regular basis can have access to EV infrastructure that will allow them to undertake tasks without being very detrimental on the environment. And a lot of these ideas, I must say, have emerged from the younger generation. And I'm really excited about that. So I think we can table this question for a more detailed answer from other staff, but I just want you to know that on the political side, in terms of our political direction, many of us around the council table are absolutely committed to those sustainability goals. But we want to be realistic. We have, constraints in terms of our financial capacity, our fiscal capacity, but we're trying to be innovative within that capacity to address those goals.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor King. So it has been a long time. That's my son. Yeah, I'm an elder now, so I'm gonna talk for the elder. So thank you for consulting us, invite us, and thank you to Director Chana. She's doing a good job with a small budget, but I would suggest you to ask more. 7.5 is a quarter of your budget to increase it. You're gonna have a good team, a good job. Thank you. Some elder people I talked to, so they said everything is increased now, the service and everything. So what you gonna do for those elder people? They are complaining. And the also transport, actually, the fee is really high, $3.75, I think. So what you gonna do to fix that problem in Ottawa?
Yeah, so, I've always been a strong advocate for affordable transit. Now, council ultimately, at the end of the day, speaks as one, but, there are 25 votes around the table. And in terms of my view, I've always been steadfast for affordability in terms of transit. In fact, in the past, especially in the last term, I had introduced during budget time motions to ensure that we have a tax freeze. The challenge for us is the fiscal pressure. And I like being realistic with people around budget direction. Budget direction is the political component. So staff is directed by council, and you had just heard that. They have to work within the resources that are given to them. The real question is, are the resources that are given to them sufficient? They will take direction and follow council's directive. And the directive, as you might have seen in the presentation, was 2.9%. There was a reason why I voted against 2.9%, because there are a lot of challenges that are confronting the city, whether it's our transit infrastructure, whether it's just affordability generally across the board. In order for us to provide a greater level of service, we have to increase the tax rate. So this is a challenge for some people too, because some older people are on fixed budgets. They have fixed income. So it's a balancing act, and we have to calibrate very carefully. But what I can say is that and I tell this to my residents, and often, they're not that upset with me asking in effect for a tax increase, because, and I even kind of partially joked in the newspaper about this, though it wasn't really a joke. A resident came to me and said, Rawlson, we don't want streets paved with gold. We don't live in Oz. We'd be happy with asphalt, right? And that requires dollars. So the one thing I can say, and this is very technical in a sense, because we deal with policy at the end of the day. I don't feel that we utilize enough tools to do the analysis around the budget to determine how rates of inflation are impacting our costs at the city. Some costs are fixed and can be controlled, especially, gasoline prices. We buy that in bulk. Some things we automatically have to incorporate because we have labor unions where there's structured negotiation, so that increases the cost. But there are some areas where I feel we could do a better job in terms of measuring inflation to really ascertain what the proper rate of tax increase should be, rather than an arbitrary kind of approach where we say all we think we can afford is 2.9%. So that's what we are going to deliver, which is how the system, in a sense, works now, rather than saying, what are the services that you need and what would they cost? And let's have a real conversation about what the municipalities, taxpayers can bear in order to provide the proper level of service. And not just proper levels of service. We have to remember that we also have a massive infrastructure deficit as well. So, we need to look at these things very seriously. So I appreciate the question, because affordability is always on my mind. It's a question of calibration. It's one thing to say we're not providing enough services. Well, if we're not providing enough services for you, we have to raise taxes. Zero sum for us. We can't just go out, as you heard Joseph say, and just borrow, especially for operations. We can't do that. But how do we calibrate to ensure that there's affordability on the taxation side, as well as services that make your life more affordable? There's a calibration that's required, but we require, in my estimation, more data to make more informed decisions around that. And I'll be talking, I've started to talk to actually some of our finance staff about that, and we'll see if we make some traction on that. But I want you to know that that is number one, because some people think, we live in some ivory tower because I'm your elected official. I live in a house just like you. I have a middle-class existence just like you. And, tax increases hurt as well for us. So we want to ensure that we are delivering the proper level of service for you. And what I can say is that that's top of mind whenever I'm making decisions around the council table, especially around the budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Zoom. Michelle?
Yes, hi. I have a question from Jean-Marie that I'm going to read on his behalf, as he appears to be driving and listening and hopefully focused on both accordingly. Good evening. Thank you very much for this great presentation. Can I please have more details about the training in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and how would we evaluate the effectiveness of such training?
Thank you for the question. Maria Penton. I'm currently the acting program manager with the equity team just since February. So we have just interviewed vendors to produce the training for the anti-racism and anti-oppression. If that's what you're referring to, that will be mandatory for all leaders starting in January. And as Shanna sort of mentioned before, the city's not great at data. So we really want to make sure that what we're putting out there, we are measuring. One of the reasons that we also evaluated the strategies, just so that it's not a performative checkbox routine. We really want to be able to measure it so that we can come back out to the community and show how successful these trainings or these programs that we're putting out there are. So really hoping to have a performance measurement framework in place and more robust data around anything that our office puts out. So thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Lota Bertulfo. I represent the Philippine Center, Canada. As you know, Filipinos are one of several racialized communities in Ottawa. So this year is the PCC's 25th year. I don't know whether the city is aware or knows about the existence of PCC, but we do exist. And yeah, so before I ask my question, because my question is very simple and very direct, so I just want to inform you of what we do and our priorities. Our priorities are to support youth in our community, newcomers. As you know, the Philippines is the biggest sending country of immigrants to Canada, surpassing China and India. And the third one are seniors. And the past years, we have been very successful in accessing federal funding for our programs. Our concern is that we can only hire staff if we have funds. And as we know, funding from, the federal government, they don't provide core funding. So if the funding is just for 1 year or 2 years, then we have to let go of our staff. So my question is it possible to be able to access core funding from the city?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So yes, we hear that constantly, project funding, short-term funding is helpful, but also disruptive to the sector and the retention of staff and the continuity of program and services. So I said, in terms of core funding or long-term funding, the community funding framework now has 2 streams for that. So the sustainability fund is a 5-year renewable funding that provides either programming funding or core funding to deliver on the mandate of an organization. That funding will reopen in 2026 to start in 2027. The other strategies that we put in place to answer to that is our project funding are up to 3 years. So it's not 5, but it's better than 1. So if you, the project funding that is currently open that closes on October 31st around youth and priority neighborhood, those will offer capacity building and programming funding for up to 1 to 3 years. I think those are the best opportunities we have right now.
Thank you so much for the question, and so thank you for the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to also thank you for the question. I think it's important to recognize that the anti-racism strategy is across the board. So it's the Indigenous community, the Black community, the racialized community, and religious communities. And I think that's very unique, actually. I think it actually reflects the nature of Ottawa, having discussions just this last weekend about the nature of our programs interesting, especially with smaller municipalities who might want to look at Ottawa's anti-racism office and strategy as a best practice or as a model. And there's a lot of interest in what we're doing. And so I think there's diversity in the strength and we have to have that wide embrace of different diverse communities. So I just wanted to thank you for the question. I thought it was very helpful. Sure.
Just for any individuals or organizations that are interested that aren't on our distribution list, Cynthia's team has a full distribution list for funding. So anytime a funding is launched, an email goes out, and then my team has an equity newsletter that goes out as well. So lots of different opportunities we'll be looking at in Q1 to engage the community and start up a departmental working group that will have community members to look at the anti-racism strategy, women gender equity strategy, and have your voices heard. So if you're not on those lists, please come and see one of us. We'd love to add you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Jacob, and I'm the Executive Director of the African, Caribbean, and Black Wellness Resource Center, the first and only in Ottawa. Thank you, Councillor King. Thank you to the city, Maria, Shana, and Cynthia, for really recognizing and turning the page on really supporting the ACB community. We're really seeing a difference that, you know what, that, you know, the ACB organizations are really starting to see the support that you guys are really trying to afford us. My question is, we are looking for support for the food cupboard. We're looking for some sustainability funding, if there is any, especially across the city with all the food cupboards and food banks. We cannot keep up with the demand. It's very sad that we have to give 2 bananas, 2 potatoes. How do you support a family of 7 on 2 bananas and 6 eggs and maybe 1 apple? When we started, you know, the ACB Wellness Resource Center, our food bank was maybe about 20 people who were coming to get food. Now we're serving about 1,000 people a month. How do we keep up with the demand? And if there is any type of sustainability funding, would you guys be supporting that?
So what I can say, at least at the political level, is we've heard the increasing demand. So there was actually a motion at the last Community Services Committee to re-examine the increased demand and to contextualize that within the next upcoming budget. So it's my hope that we see, stronger funding for the next year, because unfortunately, you're right, the demand is just growing. We want the demand to go in the opposite direction, but it's not. And the other, of course, heartbreaking and frustration for us in terms of policy is, of course, food banks were supposed to be for emergencies, and people are now just completely dependent upon them. So we're going to have that real discussion at both committee and council about increasing the amount of dollars that go into food bank support. The other element is that, the city is working on a food security policy in the context of its community safety and well-being plan. And it has been identified with the food security sector as well as the city that there's a need for better coordination to address demand. So I think some of the things that you're talking about, we're starting to have discussions about, and we're going to start to flesh out. So I don't want you to think that this isn't an issue that the city staff and the elected officials are not working on. Yeah, we're very taken by the challenge, and it's heartbreaking, and we know that we need to have more resources. So I just want you to know that we are working on that, both at a political level as well as at an administrative level.
Thank you, Councillor. Another question, has there been any specific money set aside, not only for Black populations, but for Black and racialized women? When it comes to mental health, domestic violence, and sexual assault, we've seen those be on the rise. Is there a section of dollars that is there for wraparound supports and services for women who are racialized, suffering from these issues of mental health, sexual assault, domestic violence, and food insecurity? As we know, we've seen a lot of people, and we've heard in the room today about mental health, about about food insecurity. But when it comes to women who are coming to this country, who are newcomers from war-torn countries, who are here looking for support, the wraparound services is just kind of teetering. And so if there are organizations doing said work, will they be able to get through to that allocation? Is there any sustainable funding? It's a niche, yes, but it's a necessary niche.
It's on. So thank you for the question. So I have a couple of thoughts kind of coming to mind. So the first is obviously what Cynthia's already explained around the midterm review of the community funding framework and whether there might be an opportunity there to leverage funding in collaboration with community safety and well-being. So similar to what we're doing right now with the project funding that is the 1 and the 3 year. So, but that wouldn't come until 2027. So that's a ways out. Now I know you know SAWSEN. So SAWSEN is leading some of the work under the poverty reduction strategy and the pillars of the community safety and well-being and related to gender-based violence in particular. And so we can take that offline with her and follow up with you if you like and have a separate conversation. But I just want to mention that there is the poverty reduction strategy report goes tomorrow to council. And so in relation to the last 2 questions, so gender-based violence as well as the food insecurity issue, there will be probably, I would say highly likely, a number of delegations related to those 2 particular issues. If you're able to tune in and listen to the conversation, that might be helpful to hear what Sarah Taylor and team are doing to try and tackle some of those core issues.
Just a quick follow-up. Between now and 2027, is there any emergency, just in case like some of these organizations, support groups you never know. There's sometimes a looming like, oh, we don't have any more funding. It's 2026. That's it. We're out. They close.
Yeah.
And so what happens?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that Cynthia and I do all throughout the year is really monitor the 6 envelopes under the community funding framework. And we move money around. That's how we were able to do the recent call out for project funding for 1 and 3 year in collaboration with community safety and well-being. So there could be an opportunity to do something similar in nature for 1 and 3 year. I know it's not sustainable, but it provides some short-term funding. We also have the emerging and the emergency funding envelopes as well. So oftentimes a number of agencies will come to us with a very specific need or priority that needs to be addressed in the community. And then we will consider that as part of those 2 envelopes as well. And the criteria is a little bit more flexible in terms of what we can approve. So that might be an opportunity as well. Not sustainable, but other funding envelopes.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Your question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kudrat. I'm a geriatric nurse with the Ottawa Hospital. So I'm introducing myself and my profession so that you can get the line of my query. So thank you for this informative session. My first question is, I'm not too familiar with this budgeting and funding issues, but in case we are working towards any senior initiative, which funding is appropriate for one to apply, for an organization to apply for? That's my first question. My second is, this is a comment, and I know there are so many ACB organization leaders here. I want to just give a sort of awareness that our seniors are really isolated. I work with the geriatric population. I'm a specialist. I work with geriatric psychiatrists at the Ottawa Hospital. By the time we see our seniors in the hospital, it's already too late. And there are other, like mainstream culture. The resources are there. They are looking into it. They are taking it. But why not our people? So what we're doing right now is to fight for data collection. It's still a struggle. It's not properly done yet at the Ottawa Hospital where I work, so that we will be able to have an evidence-based support that actually our people are not using these resources. There is geriatric outreach program for seniors in Ontario. It's very robust, such that if our seniors are able to tap into these resources, like their mental health, even their medication assessment, is all free. So it hurts me to see that at the time I see anybody from our community, it's already too late. And by the time you run around to do whatever you can, we will place them in a place that will even worsen their condition. So my people, how can we come together? The isolation in the senior isolation in our community is greater than what other mainstream communities are facing, but we don't have data. We need to come together. This is not what my organization, I'm from the Canadian Association of African Descendant Health Organization, CADO, headed by Dr. Itoa of University of Ottawa. It's not one organization can do because our seniors are scattered. I'm looking for a means and I'm inviting all leaders. How can we come together to address the issue of social isolation for our seniors? One thing we have to put in mind, number one, is that senior population is not as many as youth. So this is to ease your fear in that aspect, that the people we are going to work with, they are not as numerous as you are looking for youth, but they are hidden. They are in the houses. Nobody's checking. There are so many people in our community that are checking, but they are giving them food. They are not looking at their mental health status. And there are resources by the provincial governments for seniors, a lot of resources. It is from that resources that I am paid to work for seniors. We have so many geriatricians. We've been trained. We have all the resources and we are working, but it hurts for me not to see my people and knowing that they are home and struggling. So my call is, I'm ready to work, and I know so many other geriatric psychiatrists that are from this community that are ready to work, but we need a starting point. So I want to use this opportunity for us to come together, see what we can do. The issue of seniors cannot, the programs for seniors cannot be scattered, cannot be we can't have so many sources. It has to come as one so that we all bring them together. Evidence has shown that when they are within themselves, the mood is better. The mental awareness, it comes sharp. So if we want to just give glory to our own organization and sing our praises, it's not gonna work. So we need, unlike youth initiatives, we all need to come together and work and reduce the isolation and mental health issues among our seniors. There are so many seniors that are dying alone. It's only when they're at the point of death that they come to the hospital. And then your mind aches. There are some from Ghana, from Sierra Leone. By the time they can no longer take care of themselves because of the fixed income, and they are not ready to submit their income to the government to go to long-term care home, they fly back home that they have not seen in years. So the alternatives they are choosing are not even working for them. So I'm telling you the story because there are no numbers. If I could come and tell you this is a number of people, it will make more sense. But we are also having challenges in collecting data.
Yeah.
So let's come together. Thank you very much.
We appreciate you bringing that. We appreciate you adding that to our agenda. I can say this, that on multiple fronts, there's work that's starting in terms of engaging Black seniors, especially through ACAO. And there's work that is underway around a Black health plan for this area for Ottawa. And I think that needs to feature prominently in it. So that's something that we will have local discussions with community groups who are pursuing that. I know that community health and resource centers are having a discussion about that. So I'm happy to ensure that we have that discussion. And I know there was a funding component as well.
Not so much a funding, but we also under our purview the older adult plan. I would really like to get your contact information and continue that conversation, because that is what we're hearing across the board. And when you say that there's like the population is not numerous, this is seniors are the fastest growing segment of our population. There are now more people age 65 in Ottawa than children under 15. So we are all aging, we're all getting there. And what we've heard across the board is navigation, where the supports are, mental health, social isolation, programming, the connections with the hospital, the services to age at home. So it's all of the things that are going to be developed as part of the new plan. So we can take that offline and connect on that.
Thank you so much, Cynthia and
Thank you.
Councillor. This is our final question, and then we're going to head to closing remarks. We have one quick follow-up.
Hello again, it is me. Well, I didn't introduce myself last time. My name is St-Laurent Logo. I'm the director of Future Paths Network. We are a youth-led organization wherein we focus on helping Black youth who are transitioning out of foster care. For myself, the other question I do have, it's in relation to how the budgeting is done. Is there a plan, I don't know if that was done for 2025, but in the future, to put together a youth secretariat within here in Ottawa that sort of informs how the budget will impact youth, and also keeping in mind the increase in population of youth here in Ontario, which is amongst youth in Ontario and thus here in Ottawa, and thus the increase in population of immigrants here in Ottawa, how the budgeting for future will be done with that, with these differences within the population taken into account. So is there a plan to do that? I don't know what 2025 is saying, but 2026, 2027, I was just curious.
One of the things that I work with and work on is continuous youth engagement, ensuring that there are opportunities for youth to provide inputs and to actually encourage youth, which we did. I was really pleased that we did over the last 2 years to delegate at the committees. There's a process that definitely is open to all residents. And so, I had encouraged somebody who is involved with Youth Ottawa to delegate, and they were talking about all sorts of needs for youth, especially around, as example, financial information, personal finance, employment opportunities. And, I think that delegate was actually happily surprised by some of the advances that took place in future budgets around personal finance programs and trying to link residents to employment opportunities. So it's important to do that. There are informal networks that we utilize through Youth Ottawa. They actually have an interesting program where for a year, they appoint a ward counselor, and they will have an opportunity to shadow most of the counselors. I'm going to have a day where I go around with that youth who's from the Black community to really show him the ins and outs of the job. And so we're excited to do that. So if there are more formal ways that we can work together, we want to. I think we're exploring that through some youth strategies and youth outreach within our social service programs and frameworks. So I wouldn't say that there's anything that I'm aware of that is formal, but to me, it's really important to ensure, and as well, I think of my colleague, Councillor Plot in Ward 12, who actually has a specific budget consultation with youth. So whenever we are talking to youth in the community, we try to really ascertain what their key asks are and translate that into policy. I think we do it in a more informal way. I would be open to something that is more formal, but in the interim, I've been working with Youth Ottawa through some of the programs that they've had to really ascertain what youth desires are for policy changes. But my office is always open, and I always invite everybody to delegate. That's the next step. I think being here is great, but if you feel that you can contribute in front of the committee, that's even more powerful. And that's what we really want to encourage.
Appreciate your question. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight and your participation. Everybody on Zoom, thank you so much for your questions and comments. I implore everybody to stick around if they'd like to speak to the council or any of our presenters. Thank you to our presenters for tonight. We really appreciate your support and the community's support. And now I'm going to pass it over to Councillor King for closing remarks.
Well, thank you so much, firstly, Sophia, for being our moderator. I think you did a wonderful job as usual. Sophia is a central resource in my office. She acts as the equity liaison for my office in terms of equity issues. So if you have issues, you can always talk to her. I also really want to thank the incredible contribution, not just at this meeting, but on a daily basis of our staff. Maria, Cynthia, Shanna, Joseph, being here, taking your questions, and frankly, having a very professional staff that's working on our behalf. I mean, there's a lot of cynicism out there, but from clean water to ensuring that all other types of services are delivered safely and soundly and on a regular basis, that's what staff's doing every day, and we're appreciative of their work. I'm also very appreciative of my own office staff. I'm elected to provide this independent oversight over what occurs at the city, as well as work on your behalf, on residents' behalf, my constituents' behalf, to ensure the proper disposition of dollars in the treasury. And I'm supported by a very strong staff. I thank Sophia, but I also want to thank Athena and Aaron, who have been in this room, as well as Michelle online. I think it's important to recognize the hard work of our staff. And I also want to, most importantly, thank you all for your valuable input and participation in this equity budget consultation. Your insights will play a critical role in shaping the budget. We have staff here who have been taking notes, who will obtain the transcript of this session. And I'm here listening to you and your concerns. And it's important for us to have opportunities like this that actually provide a focus on the needs and aspirations of the BIPOC communities, of diverse communities. It's important for us to have ward consultations, and I have them, but I think in addition, it's important to have this opportunity to listen to the additional needs of community members across the city that are as important. And it's important for you to note that we'll consider all of the points raised tonight as we move forward with the budget process. If you do have any additional thoughts or questions after this session, please don't hesitate to reach out to my office. Your continued engagement is essential for building a stronger, more equitable community for all. And I really want to thank you for hanging in for an extra nearly 45 minutes. The room's still full. And I think that's testimony to the enlightened discussion that we've had here today. The other thing I want to just lastly thank is the coalition that's emerging, the social service agencies and the work that they do every day. Sometimes it's thankless work in a sense, that you don't always have people saying thank you, but I'm here saying thank you, and on behalf of the wider community, thank you for all the work that you do. We know it's challenging, but we are very appreciative. Thank you so much. And like I said before, later in the month, we will also have a ward consultation specifically for the budget as well. But thank you so much for being here.